All right, welcome back to another episode of the Digital Health Podcast. We have an amazing show for you guys. If this is your first time checking out the podcast, my name is Anthony Virgo. I spent the last 7 years at a health tech startup, but then I started my own AI transformation and SEO marketing company along with my partner, Kazar, who isn't on the phone call, unfortunately. I know it's a little bit confusing there, but we have an amazing guest, Dr. Lawrence Levy. How's it going today?
Going well. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. First and foremost, just want to say thank you for your time and being on the podcast. I just want to ask you to introduce yourself to the listeners, just so they could get familiar, and we'll get started with a few questions here, if that's okay with you.
Okay. So I'm Dr. Lawrence Levy. I practiced for 20 years, practicing clinical psychology. I'm a PhD level psychotherapist. I worked with lots of patients who had major depression, bipolar disorder, anxiety disorders, personality disorders. I worked with a lot of adolescent males who had criminal charges, and that's been the bulk of what I've done professionally until very recently. I pivoted in a new direction, and now I'm doing public speaking, motivational speaking, keynote speaking in the area of bipolar disorder.
Got it. So again, thank you again for being on the podcast. We usually start off by asking our guests, how did they actually get started? Because it sounds like you have a lengthy resume within the healthcare field, which you have this background and now you're on almost like advocacy work now. But how did you get started? Where did this mission-driven, purposeful place start for you? The reason why we ask this is because we find there's different ways people come into healthcare. There's a lot of people who knew that this is what they wanted to do from a child. So if they were
Yes.
a young kid and grew up and say, I want to be a doctor or I want to be a dentist, that's kind of what they did. And then there's other people who are in different industries and then came across healthcare and then they fell in love with it. So what's the story for you?
So my story is a little bit different because it goes back to my teenage years when I was about 15. Had my first episode of major depression, which was quite severe. And that really didn't stop for the rest of those high school years from grades 10 to grades 13. And so once I got out of high school and I had been battling severe depression for so many years, at some point when I went into university, which was York University in Toronto, I made the decision that I wanted to go into the field of psychotherapy in particular because I didn't want other people, especially teenagers, to have to go through what I went through. So that was basically the motivation, is having gone through the experience myself and how torturous and tormenting it was. And back in the 90s, the early 90s, there was not a lot of help available. Prozac, which is one of the first antidepressants, came out just around then. So people didn't understand major depression. So again, my goal was to try to alleviate some of the pain and suffering by going into the field because I had experienced it myself when I was a teenager.
Got it. So I guess my question is, what would be a misconception of maybe the bipolar disorder that the average person might not know? It seems to me it might be several layers when you're talking about behavior health, but also mental health and social health. All of these things come into play when it comes to someone's health. So
Yes.
I'm pretty sure there's some misconceptions that the average person might not know. From your experience, what's something about bipolar that you could maybe share with our listeners?
Sure. So I think the biggest misconception is confusing a mood disorder from a personality disorder. So I think with a personality disorder, it's a pervasive long-term pattern of behaving, how the person interacts with others, how they manage in relationships. It's a personality-focused condition. And so a lot of people will confuse, for example, borderline personality disorder with bipolar disorder, especially if the person has cycles they're very quickly in terms of how cyclical they are. They go very quickly. It can look like it's a personality disorder when in fact it's not. It's actually a mood disorder. And in particular, mood disorders, if you have a depression, if you have a hypomania or a mania, those are going to last for months. They're not going to be lasting a day or two.
Right.
They generally last for a couple of months. You can, so to the astute observer, you can definitely differentiate borderline personality disorder versus bipolar disorder. But there seems to be a lot of confusion around that because individuals who don't have a mood disorder are being diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, which is probably accurate. And sometimes it's vice versa. Some of the people who don't have a personality disorder may be diagnosed with borderline personality disorder because of some of the symptoms look a little bit similar. So that would be one of the major misunderstandings.
Got it. So there's definitely a lack of education about, how everything works, or just even a person who was seeking help, they might not even know what they're what they're seeking help for in a lot of scenarios. Do you find that?
No, that's 100% correct. They have no idea what's going on with them. They have no idea why their mood is a certain way, why they're behaving a certain way. Yeah, they don't have a clue as to what to do. So they come in to see someone like myself, who's a psychotherapist, and I try to give them some clarity and direction, try to get a sense of what's going on. Is this a mood disorder? Is this a personality disorder? Put it this way, if it's a mood disorder, it's much easier to treat. If it's a
Mm,
personality disorder, it's much more challenging to treat because, again, personality is the way we interact with the world
right.
versus mood is how we're feeling. So you can
Mm,
work with somebody who's down in the dumps, has major depression, and help them get out of it. You can also, when they're in a manic state, it's more challenging, but you can try to bring them down from that state. But for somebody who over time interacts with people in a certain way and behaves a certain way over time, that's long term. That's very, very hard to treat. So again, personality disorders are very, very challenging to treat.
got it. So I guess how we already know that like in this area of healthcare, right, whether it's mental or behavioral, it has some type of stigma. And
Yes.
someone like so if someone like myself, for example, if I was like turned off or wasn't open to actually seeking, treatment, how do you suggest that I actually start to like find resources or get out there or be more comfortable? Or what are some of your tactics when you're out there speaking or talking to, people in the community about, some of the things that they might be going through? How do you make them feel comfortable about this?
That's great. Well, the good news is that in the last several years, there's something called BetterHelp, and
Hmm.
it's online. And so people that are anxious about seeing a therapist, going in person to see a psychotherapist, they can access BetterHelp and they can see a therapist online, and it's cheaper than going to see a psychotherapist in person. So for people who are hesitant to actually seek help, BetterHelp is something that they could consider because it's all done virtually. So that would be a first step for someone who's hesitant. Other people, they recognize they have a problem, they go and see a psychologist or they see a psychotherapist, or if they're having issues with their medications in respect to their mood, they go and see a psychiatrist. But for people who've never done this before, to take that first step, if you do it virtually through the online world, and there are many resources besides just better health, it will get you going in the right direction.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And there's so many resources out there that are designed to make people feel more comfortable. I love the fact that you brought that example up because now we're in a age where technology is making access a little bit more easier for certain people. When I started in healthcare, the concept of telemedicine or telehealth was a new was brand new, and I myself didn't see a world where people were seeing their providers on a computer screen and it was working. You know what I mean? It's one thing to actually do something, but for it to actually work, it says a lot about one, the technology, but also about the people who are willing to adapt to the technology, right? The patients and the providers. You thinking about, post before the pandemic, this was kind of a new concept. Post pandemic is kind of the concept and the norm,
Sure.
and everyone was able to kind of adapt. Now we have, AI kind of coming down the pipeline, changing healthcare and things like that. What is your perspective on, AI or just some new things that might be coming through to kind of disrupt healthcare or even support what we're doing on a day to day? What is your perspective?
Okay, well, I'm glad you brought this up. So let's take a look at something like ChatGPT or something like Claude, right? These
Right.
bots that are very complex algorithms. But I don't. It's for me. I have mixed feelings because at 2 in the morning, if somebody's very distraught and they're very distressed and they're struggling, they can't contact their therapist. They can't contact their psychotherapist. So from that perspective, and lots of people do this, by the way, it's becoming more and more common, accessing a chatbot like ChatGPT or Claude and trying to get advice through one of these means can be somewhat helpful. I do not recommend it. If it's the 9 to 5 hours and you've got a problem, I don't recommend you use ChatGPT or Claude. I recommend you reach out to Better Health. That's one option. Or try to seek out psychotherapy in person. But for those times of the day when all therapists and psychiatrists and psychologists are asleep, a lot of people will turn to a chatbot. And yes, so like I said, in that regard, it can be
Right.
helpful, but not when you can actually access a real individual. It's much, much different than speaking to a chatbot. But unfortunately, this is the direction a lot of people are going.
1,000%. I think we're seeing that not only it's changing on like the provider side, the way patients actually receive help is changing too. And, AI is being a part of that, right? We've even had a lot of scenarios where we've had interviews with, therapists or counselors or what have you, where they're client facing, and a lot of them experience that their patient is coming in saying, "Hey, well, ChatGPT told me this
That's
and
right.
X, Y, and Z."
Yeah.
Where some people are getting a lot of pushback. It is a lot of pushback, but it's also a positive there where now that stigma of self-reflection or not being able to self-reflect is kind of removing that barrier where people are actually being a lot more open in a reflective manner, whether it's ChatGPT or someone in person. They now are being more open to it versus it was such a closed off thing before.
That's a great point. And like I said, I do support AI. I think we're on the next frontier of technology. So obviously I support it. But what I don't support necessarily is using it solely as your
Mhm.
source of information. And like you said, you do have patients coming in and seeing a therapist, and they'll say, well, ChatGPT told me this or Claude told me this. Again, it has some utility, but again, we have to be careful. This is not a human being. This
Right.
this algorithm does not experience empathy, does not experience compassion. It's a very complex algorithm and nothing more. So, for it to mimic these kinds of human emotions, to
Hmm.
draw in the user more, like I said, it has limited utility, and I support the use of it. But again, it's far better to go see a psychotherapist in person or see one online for sure.
Got it. What about other psychotherapists? Are you getting a sense that people are adopting AI at a fast rate? Is it still slowly coming down the pipeline in terms of adoption for day-to-day work? Well, what are you thinking right
I think that people are integrating it in their day-to-day lives. I think that some therapists even use it to dictate notes, session notes, and things of that nature. I don't do that, or I didn't do that before, but it's definitely something that's become enmeshed in professional practice. And I think it's being used more and more. And I think not only just by the clients, but by the psychotherapists, the psychologists, the psychiatrists, they're taking advantage of the opportunity. Maybe to use it to summarize session notes, they can use ChatGPT or Claude. So I never did that, but I can see that would be well integrated in today's professional practice.
1000%. Even what we do sometimes when we work with some of our clients and they want like maybe a AI agent or a chatbot to kind of transcribe notes. For some people, it helps them be more present in a session or when they're talking to people. But we've actually even heard the opposite as well, where someone says, writing their notes themselves is them being present. You know what I mean? Is them actually being there with someone. So sometimes that kind of removes that ability to do it.
That's correct. And again, I'm the kind of individual that, I embrace technology. I embrace new advancements. I'm not someone who's going to say to you, no, 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 don't turn to that kind of technology. Look, if it's helping the client at 3 in the morning, if it's helping the psychotherapist do session notes or whatever they're using it for, that's great. That's a great way of using it. But again, in the end, you want to have a very unique psychotherapeutic experience. You're not going to get that. You will not get that with a chatbot. It's not possible.
So what is it? I know for everyone, and it is a case by case experience because everyone's different. Every patient is different. Every experience is different. But what would you say is an ideal session? What should somebody leave feeling, or what are some good indicators that, hey, I found a really great provider and when it comes to seeking support in this area, what are some good indicators or green flags, I would say?
That's a great question. So, one of the things we're talking about now, we didn't mention before, is that when you go and see a therapist, even if it's online or in person, yeah, you have to be somewhat decent match between the client and the provider. So, if you find by talking to this person, because you're going to have an initial consultation, if you find that by talking to them, you feel that they're really listening, they're understanding you. I think also seeing some empathy is always important from the provider. I think if you see, as I said, empathy, a good listener, someone who's understanding, they let you speak, they don't talk over you. That's, in my mind, the markings of a good therapist. And so, again, what is important, I'm glad you brought this up, is that when the client needs to find a provider, a therapist, a psychotherapist, a psychologist, it's important to match with who the person is and make sure your personalities are a good blend. So that's a great point, actually. So, again, green flags are how well do you actually match with this person? Do they understand you? Can they communicate with you in a way that's effective, and do they have empathy and compassion for your narrative?
1000%. And I think that's something that, if we're talking about like AI and like that relationship part of it, that's something that AI can't necessarily recreate. you being in a session and, maybe I'm in a session with you and you actually know my son's name and know that he has a third grade science project coming up from the
Sure.
last session. You know what I mean? Like AI
Yes.
would be able to be prompted to kind of know that stuff, but you genuinely will be interested in that stuff, right?
That's correct. You can't feign interest, even though it seems like ChatGPT feigns interest, it feigns empathy, it feigns everything. It's just it tries to come across as human. Some people fall into that trap, which I don't think is good. But you make an excellent point that it's an algorithm that can, in quotations, remember tons of information, but it's not the same as working face to face, either in person or virtually with a psychotherapist. There's no comparison. Maybe it's good at giving information. And again, the information isn't always 100% correct. That's the other thing. It's not always 100% correct. So, in terms of information giving, I think that's one of its great utilities, AI in particular.
Definitely, definitely. And we're probably gonna wrap up in a little bit, but I want to know a little bit more about, some of the speaking engagements that you might be doing in the community or anything that you have coming up in the future. One, if you have anything coming up, we would love to hear about it. But what is, I guess, what drives you in doing sort of that work? Because oftentimes, you get with clinicians or professionals or anyone who kind of just stick to the script, meaning stick to just providing service directly in like sessions. But you're taking it kind of a step higher, where you're doing it more on a advocacy level, a global level, where you're actually sharing it widespread, even outside of a direct patient panel. So what
Sure.
is that doing for you, and what is the purpose and the goal behind it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I've gone from clinical practice for almost 20 years to now finally realizing that, I have a larger message, a more compelling message. I want to be honest with you, June is Men's Mental Health Month.
Right.
So, in particular, reaching men is one of my goals. Reaching the part of our population that generally doesn't seek help, the part of our population that always needs to feel that they need to be strong and they shouldn't have any problems they can't solve. I need to be a part of that process to break that barrier, because I'm not sure if you're aware or not, but the majority of suicides are committed by men, not
Right.
women.
Right.
So that's a very vulnerable population that needs the help, but is very hesitant to seek it. So that's one of my goals, is to try to connect with and reach out to men who are suffering. If maybe they have major depression, maybe they have an anxiety disorder, maybe they have bipolar disorder, just to be able to connect with them and let them know, look, everybody suffers. It's not a weakness.
Right.
It's a vulnerability that could be used as a step towards courage and strength. And so I feel that, public speaking, keynote speaking, I have a couple of opportunities in the works. I think those are far more powerful than me sitting down one to one with one patient. I think I
Right.
could reach a much wider audience, like you were saying.
Definitely, definitely, and that's amazing. We're encouraging you as you go out there, spread the word and be widespread, because we do know it's impactful to kind of be vocal about this, because we're doing the same thing kind of with this podcast, right? We know that there's this quote unquote new technology coming down the pipeline, or a new way of people adapting healthcare, or healthcare is going to shift, right? It's like with social media. We didn't know what social media was going to do at the time, but now we know the effects of it. Kind of
Yes.
similar with AI. We know that it's going to affect us in some way, shape, or form, but we're hearing extreme stories, like people are in relationships with their AI and things of
Well,
that nature. So we want to
it's
at least be loud and advocate about this stuff. So people are one, knowledgeable, but we feel like the reach could be impactful if we get it to the right people, 1,000%.
And that's a
So
great point too. What worries me is what you just said. People actually in relationships with AI, it's not uncommon. It's becoming more and more common. So
right.
what we see is we see people who feel lonely, who feel isolated, who feel disconnected. Suddenly now they're connecting, but they're using AI. And to be
Mhm.
honest with you, in my own personal opinion, I don't think that's a great way to go. Having a AI girlfriend where you can construct what they look like, how they respond, what they say. I mean, come on, this is like a fantasy thing, has nothing to do with reality. So it can be kind of dangerous in some ways too.
Right,
Really can.
1,000%. I can only like, and we're at the beginning of this thing getting, you know what I mean? Give it another, I'll say 6 months, but let's
Hmm.
fast forward. Imagine what AI is going to be looking and feeling like in just 2 years, If people are
Right.
already having this like relationship, or having some type of something that's impacting their day to day, I would say. Because I feel like anything health related is something that could potentially impact your day to day, right?
That's
Whether
correct.
it's mental, physically, emotionally. And we know this AI thing is going to be like a social, environmental, digital thing that's gonna that's gonna do something. We're just not clear as of yet. So
We're
I
not
think
clear. I mean, we also need to be careful it doesn't overtake everything. We have to be careful it doesn't put a lot of people out of work, which is already it's already starting to do that. So we've got to be very mindful. It's an extremely powerful technology, but we cannot use it as a substitution for connection. People, mentally healthy, emotionally healthy people seek genuine connection. They will not get that through ChatGPT or Cloud. A chatbot will not give them the connection they're seeking. And connection is crucial in our world because we are very disconnected in many different ways.
for sure. And like the technology isn't helping. If anything, is moving us far from the human connection in terms of like a personal connection. Sometimes, you know,
That's right.
you lose sight of that. Oh man. So Dr. Levy, this has been an amazing conversation. I guess I want to leave off on a powerful note. So I want to ask for the listeners, what's one powerful message you want to leave with us? It could be anything from your personal experience or anything we talked about today. And then also, what are your channels to connect with you? I'm pretty sure someone heard a bunch of value, a ton of value, and want to connect with you in some way, shape, or form. How can they reach out to you directly?
Okay, well let's go back to the message. What's the overriding compelling message I have for viewers?
Yep.
Well, essentially, again, it goes back to what I said earlier. It's Men's Mental Health Month this month, the entire month of June. So, you know, if you have a father, a brother, a grandfather, a friend, a male friend, my advice is reach out to them because this is the part of our population that has this perception that they can't be vulnerable, they can't be weak, they can't seek help. We need to change that narrative because again, it goes back to what I said also before about the suicide rate. It's not women taking their own lives in general, it's men. And it's not specifically United States or United Kingdom or Canada. It's in
Right.
almost every country. It's a very, very biased slant towards males taking their lives. And males would only be taking their lives if they refuse to get help, if they're embarrassed to get help, if they have a mental illness like major depression or bipolar disorder that goes untreated. I mean, yeah, that could potentially lead to a suicide attempt. So my message is if you know anybody in your life that you care about, like a father, grandfather, brother, son, whatever it is, whoever's the male in your life, reach out to them. If you know they're struggling, make a suggestion. Let them know that it's okay for them to reach out to get help. They cannot be this mountain made of steel. It's just
Right.
not. In today's day and age, with all the stressors everybody faces, everybody needs help. So, you know, there's the online route, there's the in-person route. So the messages for men in particular, if you're not feeling well mentally, if you feel completely stressed and distressed, you feel isolated and alone, I would strongly recommend you reach out professionally for someone to help you. Now, for your other question, what was the other question? Just remind me the last part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, the channels where people can actually reach out and
Yes,
connect with
that's fine. So I have through LinkedIn, I have my profile. Obviously, they can get in touch with me through LinkedIn, and also I have a website which is connected to LinkedIn. They can get through to me through my website there, and I think my LinkedIn profile even mentions my email. So there's many ways they can get in touch with me through email, through my website, and through LinkedIn by sending me a message, just simply messaging me because I will respond if someone contacts me.
you. Definitely, definitely. Lawrence, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for your time today and just being open to the Digital Health Podcast and sharing everything that you shared today.
I appreciate it. Thanks for your time. Thank you.
No worries. Take care. You enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Take care.